Welcome to this Killick Explains video. This time, the results of a poll around what stops people from seeking financial advice. Now, there are many reasons why some people may not seek advice. They may not feel they need it, but those people who do feel they'd like some can be easily put off. Now, I just want to discuss some of the reasons why that happens and potentially some of the ways of dealing with them. Now, the question I set in a recent poll was exactly that. What do you fear most when it comes to seeking financial advice from somebody else? And the answers I offered were the baffling jargon that's involved in financial services sometimes, and that attracted 10% of the total votes. That wasn't the winning answer. That went to concerns around the fees involved, which attracted 59% of the total vote. Then there was the amount of time it takes to find an advisor, get things set up and get organised, and potentially the sort of ongoing commitment people feel might be involved, and that was 6% of the poll result. And then finally, quite a big answer, 25% of the votes went to not really knowing where to get started. And here I'd say the financial services industry has got a bit of work to do in order to make that less of a hurdle. So let's take these one in turn. Looking for some kind of advisor, whether that person's going to offer you pure investment advice, or whether you're looking for broader wealth planning advice, or whether you're looking for a mix of the two, because many of our investment decisions are not made in isolation, in a vacuum. We tend to save and invest in order to achieve goals. So there is a link between investing in a lot of cases and being clear about what those goals might be and when we can expect to achieve them. But nonetheless, it can be split down. So the first thing to say is, yeah, jargon is a problem. The financial services industry, like the medical profession, for example, uses a lot of jargon. But the fact that people within the industry talk to each other in a jargon-fueled manner doesn't justify using it when dealing with people who are not versed in financial services language. So my first piece of advice would be, if you look for an advisor, once you've done the basic checks, are they FCA authorized, for example? And once you've done a few more homework checks, do I know anyone that uses them? Do they come recommended? That can be a big help when it comes to everything from plumbers to builders to dentists to financial advisors. Beyond that, if and when you have a conversation or look at the website, yeah, it's fair enough to say, if I am baffled and confused by the language being used, that is their problem, not mine. A good advisor will break things down, won't make you feel stupid when you ask questions, and will be prepared to take the time to make sure that you don't feel flummoxed by the language around everything from basic share investing, for example, through to setting up a pension, through to drawing down income when you finally stop work. So, I tend to agree with the 10% of people who said, I can be put off by the jargon, and I think it's important that you aren't. Now, number two was fees, and this attracted the majority of the poll result. Perhaps not surprisingly, people do worry about not getting good value for money, and that's true whether they're buying a car, a meal in a restaurant, or receiving all-important advice about their investments and general financial strategy. Now, fees are, to a degree, a fact of life. There are no free lunches, and that's true in the wealth management space, the investment space, as much as it is in any other space. But there are some things to look for, which I'll run through in a moment. One thing I would say, though, is cheap or cheapest isn't always best. I mean, that's stating the obvious in a way. What I look for in life is value for money. In other words, I don't mind paying for a service if I think I'm getting something valuable in return. Other people will disagree and always go for the cheapest option no matter what they're buying, but I know from experience that doesn't always give you what I would consider the best value for money. Now, in terms of looking at professional fees, I would say that there are three things that are pretty important. One is you do need to understand what you are paying and you need to benchmark it. So look at what you're being asked to pay, make sure you understand how that compares to other firms, and to help you with that, try and make sure you get some clarity around the impact that fees and or advice will have on your overall portfolio, your overall performance. So make sure, for example, that anyone you talk to gives you a forecast of the likely impact of fees and charges, and then should you end up signing up with them, as it were, make sure you're getting regular analysis of the actual post-event impact that fees and charges have had on your overall portfolio and performance. That's really important. So you want clarity and you want the full picture. It's really important to try and understand what you're paying for what. And funds in particular in the past have been a bit sort of grey about this, if you like. It's really important to understand what part of the charges that are being levied is going towards the cost of running a portfolio, what's going to other advice, and so on. If you've got a portfolio of your own, you want to understand what are the dealing fees, what's the custody element, what's the foreign exchange element, and so on. So although having the full picture won't necessarily reduce the amount you're paying, it will at least allow you to make a considered decision about that all-important value for money that I mentioned. And do push anyone you talk to give you a clear picture. And if it isn't clear to you how fees and charges work and what impact they're likely to have, then ask again or consider moving on. Now, the time it takes, I'm glad to say that only 6% of respondents said, I'm worried it's just going to take up too much time. Unfortunately, putting together a successful financial plan, putting together an investment strategy does take a little bit of time. I mean, anyone who's going to try and advise you on that, for example, should find out how much you know already, should find out what interest you've got in being involved in, for example, day-to-day management of a portfolio, which may be none to quite a lot, what your risk tolerance is. They also need to understand a bit about your financial background, your capacity to absorb losses, and so on. So there is a bit of time required, depending on what you're looking for in terms of the service, to find out the right kind of information so that the advice you're offered is what a regulator would call suitable and what most of us would understand to be appropriate to your needs, goals, and background. However, usually you get the benefit of investing that time up front subsequently. And bear in mind, there are a range of different solutions that commit different amounts of time. In investing, for example, execution only, app-based investing requires very little input from you on a regular basis, whereas if you want a more comprehensive wealth management solution that might involve a review of tax, for example, and tax effective solutions, might involve regular regulatory updates, and might have to take account of multiple requirements across different generations of a family, well, yes, that's going to be a more involved process. And then finally, where to get started. And I would agree that the financial services industry isn't brilliant at this. There are so many different ways, it seems, you can engage with an advisor. There are so many different levels of service on offer. So here are a few guidelines. First of all, think about what you need. So is it pure investment advice or an investment solution? Is it something wider, wealth planning or planning led? Is it a mixture of the two? And would you prefer to be able to get that under one roof? In other words, are you the kind of person that likes to keep everything delineated in little pockets, if you like, or would it be more convenient to have a what's called one-stop shop? In other words, an advisory firm that can actually adapt with your requirements, adapt with your needs, because those might change. In our 20s and 30s, they can be as simple as trying to pay a mortgage, for example, but as we get older and take on other commitments, things get more complicated and we need a broader skill set. So there we have it. There are some barriers to seeking financial advice, even once people have decided that's what they'd like to do. Firms need to get as good as they can at being clear about jargon, not using it, explaining complex terms, educating people, which isn't a patronizing term, it just means letting them know what's going on. Fees need to be transparent and the impact needs to be made as clear as possible. Time, well, a good firm will minimize the amount of time that you have to spend once, let's say, an initial portfolio or initial plan's been established. And where to get started. Yes, I do sympathize with people who are not sure where to get started, but better to have that first conversation, start doing your research, than to literally do nothing at all. To find out more about what are pretty big topics, to be honest, do go to our comprehensive library of educational videos, killick.com/learn. And if you'd like a copy of any of my guides, which deal with some of the issues that I've just been talking about and others besides, then do ping us an email, editor@killick.com, and we can organise those in physical or digital versions.